Come on, what happened? Oh, oh, that's why.
You don't have to get out of the way.
Sure.
plans and also District number 43. The history actually goes back more than 200 years before this picture was taken in 1915. This picture is on the side of the schoolhouse that was in Fresh Ponds at the corner of Davidson's Mill Road and Fresh Ponds Road. We'll get to that and the history behind that, but I wanted to start way back in the 17th century. At the end of the century, a certain Henry Van Dyke coming from Long Island by way of the Netherlands, settled in the area that would be called Fresh Ponds. He is possibly the earliest settler in South Brunswick. Now, tradition states that Jediah Higgins, over off of Route 27, was the first settler in South Brunswick. But that may be in dispute if you consider Henry Van Dyke coming in the late 1600s, because we associate Higgins with the year 1700. Anyway, the Van Dykes were the earliest settlers in that area that we know of now as Fresh Ponds. The next century, the 18th century, I'll give you some highlights, and what we're doing, we're building up to this 1915 picture. The main farm there was called the Simon Van Dyke Plantation. There was also a distillery in the 18th century, the Samuel Combs, C-O-M-B-S Distillery. There was also a mill called the John Lawrence Mill. There was also a few smaller farms. The word plantation was used by the Dutch a lot, and it's just a fancy word for a farm. There was the Drake Farm and the Wink Farm. There was also the Campbells. They did not farm the land, but they owned quite a bit of land in Fresh Ponds. And the interesting thing about the Campbells, Robert and Duncan, they were suspected of being loyalists. And they were looked upon negatively by a lot of people who lived in the Fresh Ponds area. There was also a James Parker, a William Cheeseman, and a John Ireland. Those are all the names that I could find from the 18th century. There were probably some others. And since at the time it was a remote area of Fresh Ponds, there was probably a few squatters who did not own the land, but they were living off the land. The center of this Fresh Ponds area, of course, develops where Davidson's Mill Road and Fresh Ponds Road cross. And that roughly is developed in 1768, where you have two viable roads forming the crossroads. And there was a cluster of buildings at that crossroads. So the potential for Fresh Ponds to become a hamlet or a village was there. But there are certain reasons which we'll get into why it never developed that far. The area was referred to as Fresh Ponds in the late 1700s. So during the time of the American Revolution and thereafter, most of the settlers in the South Brunswick area, what would become South Brunswick Township, called this area Fresh Ponds. Before then, it was known as Woodsville. And people kept using the word Woodsville or Woodside or Woodlands for quite a few years. Probably old timers used that up till the 1880s. In the 19th century, early 19th century, there were 12 houses that we can count in the Fresh Ponds area. There was a church, a schoolhouse, and a general store. Some of the names of the people living there in the early 19th century was the Brown family, the Palmer family, the Woods family, Hudd family, Haywood, Van Hise, Nouse, Fritz, Beekman, Whitlock, Morley, Mulvey, Forch, Reed, Van Arsdalen, and Davison. Samuel Cox was in the area, Applegate, Griggs, Cortelyou, and Parker. Some of these are very well-known names in South Brunswick history. Van Pelt's Mill was sold to the Davidsons or Davisons. Some people refer to them without the D, some with the D. And so it became known as Davidson's Mill, and hence the name for the road, Davidson's Mill Road. Now we get up to the schoolhouse. The schoolhouse was built on land that was sold or actually given to the township by Catherine Van Dyke Rue. So she's a descendant of the original settler of Fresh Ponds. She married William Rue, and she was the daughter of John Van Dyke. She inherited the land in 1834, and shortly thereafter, the land was designated for a school building. That school lasted until 1933.
No, I was going to show the building as it is today.
Okay, and Randy's going to show you the building as it is today.
So you can visit it, anytime you go on the road there. It's right off the side of the road. There's the actual schoolhouse. It's still in existence. And it's right there on Fresh Ponds Road. So you can kind of tell when you switch back, you can tell that one, you can see the spacing of the windows. You can tell it's the same shot on the side over there. But yeah, it's an interesting place to visit. And also the chapel, we'll get to in a little bit, is right next door to that.
Okay.
Yeah.
The Fresh Ponds Chapel, again, land was granted for that. It comes into existence around 1840. The cemetery area was used as far back as actually before the start of the 1800s. There were stones that you can see there that date back to 1810. There were also unmarked graves of slaves a short distance away, probably in the wooded area, which is next to the stones. You see in this picture, you can see some of the stones over in the left, and then you see the trees behind there. And probably where the trees are were where the graves of slaves were located. There's also Sunday school associated with the chapel, and that was run by the Methodist Episcopal Church from 1840 to 1852. Then it became known as the Methodist Protestant Church from 1853 to 1886, and then it became a non-denominational church 1887 onward. Okay, I don't know. You have some more pictures? To show of this?
Yeah, I have some of the churchyard too.
Okay.
Let's go back for a second.
That's the school.
Yeah, this is
side.
a school.
Yeah, now that could be the side where they took the picture.
Yeah, that's a better picture. That's right there is where they where the schoolhouse is. That's a better shot of the schoolhouse. Yeah. And they received 2 plaques in 1996 as being the oldest. It was the first historic designation for a structure in the township, from what I understand. And Robert Turton received those. He's actually the pastor there now. So yeah, that's the side of the schoolhouse. And let me switch through screens here. Hold on. As I have to go over here. Here's the other side. You can see the cemetery on this side. This is the other side of the. Actually, that's the chapel end, right? Or is that no? That's the schoolhouse. There's the schoolhouse, and the chapel's off. You can't see it. The chapel's over this way, right, Ed?
I guess.
Yeah, because that is the school, right? Yeah. So there's a shot of some of the headstones in the cemetery, and there's some more over there too.
Yeah, now you took the pictures of some readable headstones.
Yeah, I didn't zoom right in on them. Let's see if we can get in on that one.
Yeah, because the oldest ones are, you can't read them. They've been weathered so much.
Yeah, I don't think I have one that I can zoom in on. I can't quite make it out from this one. Let's see what it says. This one.
Oh, you got a George King there.
Yeah, there's King, and I'm trying to see who else is there. Nah, unfortunately, I have to go on my phone and look. Yeah, I don't have it in the slides. So, yeah. So let's see. What do we want to talk about next, Ed?
Well, I'm getting up to the 20th century.
Okay.
Okay. Interesting things that happened in Fresh Ponds, and it wasn't much. One of the reasons that Fresh Ponds never developed into a village was because there was no major transportation route going through the area. The closest thing to it would be the Elizabeth Trenton trolley line, which started in 1900. And that was close enough for people to get on and avail themselves of either going north or south. And it also allowed some people to come to the area, possibly to vacation, that type of thing. But it never really developed into anything big time. And of course, the trolley dies out in all areas except maybe San Francisco and so forth, just as a tourist attraction. But it didn't last that long. In the 20th century, there were several new farms developing and new home construction. And there were new people coming into the area. One, of course, developing would be the egg farmers. And that became a big thing for quite a while. So in the 20th century, Fresh Ponds experiences a wider ethnic base. And so you had Scottish people in the area, you had English people in the area, Dutch, Hungarian, German, Russian, Irish. And from several of those areas, you had Jewish farmers coming in. By the middle of the 20th century, the major development, and it sort of skirted the Fresh Ponds area and really didn't help it at all, was the New Jersey Turnpike development, which starts in 1950 as far as being constructed. Also in the 20th century, the Church of Fresh Ponds joins the Gospel Mission Corps in 1963. And that Gospel Mission Corps was associated with the Salvation Army and the American Rescue Workers. Okay, Randy, that takes care of the 20th century. And then I'll leave the last part for today, what's going on today.
Okay. So let's see, what do I have here as far as the visuals? These are just some. This is an excerpt from the Home News from 1911. It's just talked about how it was a place they were having entertainment there, and you can catch the trolley line from Trenton and the Davidson Mill Station where it turns at 10 o'clock. So it was a real destination. This is from the newspaper from 1911. So it was a long time ago. They were having some entertainer on St. Patrick's Day. So it was actually a place to be visited. It was run in the paper as like something to do for entertainment.
Right.
Believe it or not.
Yeah, and Fresh Ponds had a core. It had a central location. It had an identifiable center around which could have developed a a community viable enough to be a village, such as maybe Road Hall was possibly going to do, but didn't. Maybe something along the lines of Dayton, but Dayton had a lot more going for it than Fresh Ponds or Road Hall. So it didn't make it. And so then the positive quality about it is its quaintness. Fresh Ponds is definitely a quaint area and has remained such for hundreds of years.
So let's see what else we got up here. This is just showing that when they did the Hunter research survey of the township about 20 years ago, they just identified it as eligible for a historic district, and it talks about how there was a distillery there, like you were mentioning, a general store, and those things. It was close to the mill, actually, right?
Right.
It's in the same area as the mill. And it's just talks about it more. It's just something from the Hunter research. So we go in here.
Oh, you had a question down.
Oh yeah,
the corner there. Yeah. Was there a pond?
Was there a pond? Oh, that's a good question.
Yeah.
Well, the fresh ponds, actually, that goes in. I have some things. I have the supporting things for this. Like for fresh ponds, the reason it was called that, and I think there's another place up in New York that's called Fresh Ponds. It's because it's very swampy around there. If you go in the area, you're driving along the road, you can see along the side of the road, kind of brackish water. So it was actually known as Pigeon Swamp, as Ed had mentioned earlier, because it was an area that they tried to drain, and they called it the drainage area, the little canal that they made, that eventually met all the way up to it went to what's the place for that that's where Davidson's Mill, all that stuff. Not Davidson's Mill. What's the name of the
Allenbach?
No, No, I forgot the name of it. Eventually, it goes all the way up to and empties up in Lawrence Brook. Sorry.
Oh yeah.
So the ditch empties in Lawrence Brook, but you can see it today when you're driving on Fresh Ponds Road, and you look over to the side. You'll see a bridge, and it's not marked as what it is, but it's actually part of the Great Ditch. And if you go to Google Maps and type in Great Ditch, it'll show you right where it is and which roads it's over. I've actually driven along there and looked over, and it's brackish looking. Like I said, it's very swampy back there, but it's the remnants of the Great Ditch that was built. And here's the petition that was put out by the people in the township in 1779, and they wanted to clear the swamp. They wanted to drain it to make the land around it more arable and around Pigeon Swamp. So it was called the Great Ditch, and they had to ask the governor, the first governor of New Jersey, William Livingston, if he could actually, if they could do it. So they got permission, and in 1779 they petitioned, and then they started to drain it the year after, and they started to build to dig a Great Ditch, which had to be maintained, and they charged the surrounding landowners for that to make the land more arable. So it was something that had to go through legislature.
Yeah, and Randy, I think it's important to note, and it does mention it in that last sentence there. You're talking about a big project starting in the middle of the Revolutionary War. And I think it should be noted that there were several slaves who did a lot of work on that Great Ditch.
Okay.
Because a lot of the farmers and farmers' sons and so forth were off fighting the war or serving in the militia, so they were on and off as far as their farm duties were concerned and so forth. So unsung heroes of the Great Ditch would be those workers who were not allowed to participate in the war for one reason or another, but were put to work doing this type of thing.
Okay, so they actually were the ones, some of the people that dug the ditch.
Yeah, and there's no, I don't know if there's a marker for the Great Ditch.
No, it's not marked. It's just a small bridge. It's a concrete bridge. Because I stopped because I wanted to see. I saw it on Google Maps and I drove out there, and sure enough, it's there where it's supposed to be according to the map. And
Right.
it's just a bridge that goes over because the road needs a bridge there because it goes over a small body of water, which is the Great Ditch. And it's pretty brackish looking, but you got to
Right.
think about it. It's been over 100 years since anybody tried to clear it, but it still
Yeah.
flows. It flows into the Lawrence Brook.
Yeah, right. And the ponds, then you conjure up an image in your mind of what a pond looks like. Well, it's not really that type of thing. First of all, it's a swamp area where you have some dry elevations, and then you have these marsh pools.
Mhm.
Okay, and so the ponds themselves are really marsh pools.
Mhm.
And I guess if they wanted to be technical, that this area, instead of be called fresh ponds, could be called fresh pools.
Fresh pools, yeah.
But as you say, brackish and all that, mosquito infested. It was not the friendliest area to work in, but parts of the Pigeon Swamp, because of its marshy quality and so forth, where they could drain, that could be then grazing areas for cattle. So
Right.
it was an important area for the farmers
So it did work.
and also timber. So around this fresh ponds area, you had timber being harvested, and you had land where it could be used possibly for cattle grazing, that
Okay.
type of thing.
So in that sense, it was successful. It did make the land more manageable and arable.
Right,
Okay.
right. But on the other hand, because of the swampy area and so forth, that's another reason why Fresh Ponds never developed into a village.
Just because it was not the most hospitable
Right,
place.
it was not a really friendly and habitable place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that if it's actually worth it drive out. If you just pull up Google Maps and put in Great Ditch, it'll show you right where to go. You can even follow it on your phone. You can see when you go over the road, you can see the little concrete bridge. It's not much to look at, but it is evidence of something that was begun in 1780, you know, so it was a long time ago, and it's still there today. So in that way, it's very interesting. And this is the part of the petition. One of our members, Pat Romano, actually did this. She transcribed it, and it's just telling them they're asking the governor if they can do this, if they can get the legislation passed so they can clear the ditch. But and here it is on Google Maps. I mean, if you look right, this is right from Google Maps. It'll take you. There's a Pigeon Swamp area right there, but it's right on Fresh Ponds Road. And there's other places too, but that's the one that I think is the clearest example of it. So yeah, so it's still there, and from all those years ago.
Okay, we ready for the 21st century?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Big change in the area when the 21st century comes along. And that is the warehouse construction and the ensuing truck traffic. This gets several of the residents of Fresh Ponds riled up. And the Eastern Village Association is formed to attempt to preserve farmland. And they opposed the warehouse development and the zoning of land for warehouses. Well, you can see that the warehouses were winning the battle. When you see all the warehouses along the turnpike there. And it zeroed in on the Pulda farm. Now, the Pulda farm was part of the extensive Van Dyke plantation. So just like you had the Lawrence family that had the Longbridge farm, which took up most of what is now Monmouth Junction, now you had this Van Dyke property dwindling down to what's called Pulda Farm. And what the Eastern Village Association wanted to do was have this farm designated as open space and to become part of Pigeon Swamp State Park. They also were trying to get something done with the Bill and Dutch Himmel Farm and Woods, which was about 40 acres. In other words, preserve parts of Fresh Ponds from being developed for warehouses. And Middlesex County did declare the Himmel Farm an open space preserve. The Polda Farm, I think they were successful. I don't know if they were 100% successful. I think they were partially successful. And it basically was a victory, but maybe a shallow victory because of all the warehouses that have been built in the South Brunswick area since the first one went up. And some people would say that's progress. Some people would say, well, that helps the tax base of the township with the, like with the schools and the population and the schools going way up. Somebody's got to pay for it somehow. So it's basically did not bode well for Fresh Ponds. In fact, it sort of put Fresh Ponds in the place it already was. It's probably going to stay the way it is for a long period of time, with a stalemate of Pigeon Swamp State Park is there. There's open space designation. There is some housing being constructed, that sort of thing. And I think the limit of the warehouses, there might be a few more and that'll be it. But my take on it is that Fresh Ponds, as it was in the beginning of the 21st century, is going to stay the same in the next century.
So it's not going to change much now.
I feel that's the way it's going to go.
And the chapel is still used. I was talking to Robert Turton, who's a reverend there, and it is still used today. It's used on Sundays, and so they still have a congregation after all these years. So,
and it's on small scale and it's quaint.
yeah,
And that's basically what Fresh Ponds is. It's a quaint area. Everything's low key, small scale.
yeah, it's a pretty place to visit.
Yeah.
So that with the Pigeon Swamp, that's the tie-ins I have. Do you have anything else to add?
No, that's it, because I brought it up to, the warehouse situation.
Okay.
And that's it.
All right. Well, we can talk about we're going to do National Night Out in August. It's going to be that's it over. Which park is that? Over on the other side. Roland Park, right?
Yeah, Roland Park.
Yeah, it's going to be at Roland Park. So we're going to be out there in the first Tuesday in August. So we'll be there then with a table. And also next month, what we're going to do, we're going to do like a cemetery update, like what's going on with the South Brunswick cemeteries that we visited.
Right.
And what else are we going to talk about
well, we want to update people on the calendar, the progress on the calendar.
Yeah, the calendar's coming along pretty well. It'll be finished, I hope, by August, actually.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And we'll be talking about some future plans that we have. And I don't know, Randy, you had somebody who was asking about the history of South Brunswick, the writing of that.
Yeah, I had somebody ask about the history book that Ed's working on. So
yeah, now that is a project that is going to take years. I am finished writing up to 1750. So I started with actually prehistoric South Brunswick Township. If anybody's interested in reading those excerpts, the library has those, and we can make them available. We just run off a copy for you if you're interested. But I started with prehistoric South Brunswick and got up to 1750. Then what is going to happen is I'm going to be picking it up again and working on 1750 to 1775. So I'm going to bring it up to the Revolutionary War. And then the Revolutionary War years are going to be separate with South Brunswick history. And then I'll follow with the next 25 years, something like that.
Yeah. What was that question? I'm not used to the new format here. I have to go over here to see the question. Something about the letter. You can unmute and ask too. Let's see here. Chat is.
Is this about the drainage thing?
Oh yeah, no. Is the letter that was part of the presentation only a photo, or is the original at the library? This actually, this is from the state library. I went down there a couple of years ago, and I paid for it. We paid for a digital copy of it. So this is a really high quality reproduction of the letter from 1779. Here in this room, we had the Pigeon Swamp Ledger, and Pigeon Swamp Ledger was a transaction of all the money that changed hands because for the maintenance of the ditch. We actually have that here. It's here in a cabinet. We had it preserved a few years ago. Seal Leadham had done a lot of research on it, and then we were lucky enough to get a grant a few years ago to have it conserved and digitized. So I have all of these images, and I have the Pigeon Swamp Ledger. I have them both in digital form, and the Pigeon Swamp Ledger is also conserved in here. So if anyone was actually interested in seeing those documents from 1780, actually, the Pigeon Swamp Ledger is from, I can make an arrangement to show it to you. It's pretty interesting on the Pigeon Swamp Ledger because it's 1780, and the payments, you can see they're done in pounds. So they're not done in dollars because they're still not on a standard system yet. But, yep.
Yeah, what most interesting to me are the signatures, which are very clear.
Yeah.
I mean, you see it's hard to read some of the writing, but the signatures are very clear. An indication to me that these are pretty well educated people who signed it. And John Wetherell's signature on top there is most interesting to me.
Yeah.
And I would say of the four that have signed it, he's the most famous one. Williamson, David Williamson would be the second most famous, and then Gulick, and then Terhune. I believe Williamson served as a justice of the peace for a while, and he had something to do with Roadwall Tavern.
Okay.
And of course, John Wetherell, owning over 1,000 acres of land, was probably the second largest landowner in South Brunswick after the Lawrence family.
So it's Lawrence and the Wetherell.
With their plantation. So these are very influential people in South Brunswick. In other words, they're shakers and movers.
Yeah, they're probably the four most wealthy men in the township, right?
Well, no, what this would indicate would be who owned Pigeon Swamp.
Okay.
Okay, so in other words, these guys signing this were the primary owners of Pigeon Swamp.
Okay.
At the time. And they had ideas of draining it and using the land for various purposes. And at the time, as I say, and for years after that, it was used for timber, for lumber, and it was used for cattle grazing.
And people hid out there too.
Oh, yeah, and hunting, hunting. In the mysteries that I have written, I highlight Pigeon Swamp. Twice I highlighted.
People still hunt there today during hunting season.
Yeah, I guess,
Yeah.
within season,
Yeah.
Yeah, hunt clubs in South Brunswick have, that's like a tradition.
Mhm.
You know, that was into the 21st century, as far as I know.
Yeah, I've seen newspaper accounts that talk about what they spotted there, and when somebody actually, got something, they talk
Yeah,
about
the
hunting.
flora and fauna in Pigeon Swamp is vast, tremendous. I mean, it's a great area to do that type of thing.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, if you want to go snooping around.
So that's it for our Fresh Ponds presentation, and I'll keep everybody updated on what's going on for next month, National Night Out. and everything else like that. But that's it, right, Ed? Are we good?
Right, I just wanted to put a word in for the South Brunswick Arts Commission. They're rebounding from the COVID letdown where they didn't have any art exhibits at the municipal building. Now they have one up and it's worth visiting. It's rhythm and movement, and it's a judged art exhibit. And I think you'll enjoy it if you drop by the municipal building. It's in the hallway on both sides of the hall over where the mayor's office is. So I invite you to go over there. It'll be up there until August 19th. So you got plenty of time to get over there.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Ed. And thanks for everybody for coming out tonight. And stay tuned. We'll talk to you soon. Good night.
Thank you.
All right. Yeah, the short ones are better, Brandon.
Yeah.
Now I have time to pick up my grandson.